So the purpose of this presentation is to give you some insights into how you can set up ASKBILL for your own property. It should take you about 15 to 20 minutes and it's not too difficult. So just watch this YouTube and then you should be able to do it very quickly. So the first thing that you need to do when you come to the ASKBILL website is create an account, and there's a step-by-step process where we gather information about your business name, ABN, PIC number, etc., and the billing address. And once you've been through that process, you'll be taken to a setup wizard that takes you through 3 steps. Firstly, to put in the property details and information about the animals that are on the property as a whole. The second process is to identify particular monitored areas within the farm, so subsets of paddocks within the property, and monitored mobs that you want to monitor more closely using ASKBILL. And then the final step is to complete the account setup, and then you're ready to go with ASKBILL. So the first thing you need to do is locate yourself on a Google map, and having entered your address, Google will put a flag in the spot where it thinks your farm is located. And what you need to do is check that that location is actually correct, because we're using a 5 by 5 kilometre grid for weather data. So we want to make sure that we're grabbing the right weather data for your farm. So just check that the location is correct and confirm that in the software. We then start you through the process of entering information about the pasture that's on the property, then follow on with stock numbers, key dates, treatments, feed supplements, etc. But the first step is to look at the pasture that exists on the property, and we start by entering information about the property as a whole. So firstly, what's the grazable area of the property? The proportion of pasture on the property that has winter activity versus summer activity. You do that in terms of a percentage. And then we move to the slider bars and indicate the quality of that pasture. And we mean the quality of that pasture when it's in its active growing phase. And you use the slider bar to indicate quality of both winter and summer active pasture. And similarly for soil fertility, we have a slider bar. If at any time you need more assistance in understanding how to set those bars, you can always click on the little information button above the slider bar and it'll give you some guidance on how to do things. We also ask you to enter the soil type into the software. This is very important for predicting how much grass is going to be grown given a certain amount of rainfall and the temperature, etc. The other thing that you need to do is make an estimate of the pasture availability over the property as a whole, on average, at the start-up date. So we need to estimate that in terms of kilograms of dry matter per hectare, and you can see here I've entered that I think there's currently 2,000 kilograms of dry matter per hectare across the farm. And I've also indicated that on the 1st of September, I'd also like to have 2,000 kilograms of pasture on the property. So that's me setting a target for pasture availability sometime within the next 90 days. 90 days is the limit of the predictionability of ASKBILL at the moment. So as I said, pasture now and for a future target sometime in the next 90 days. The second step is to enter all the classes of livestock that are on the property. You don't have to put them in mobs. You can just put all your breeding ewes together as one lot, all your lambs together as one lot, all your wethers, for example, and you can split them up later in monitored mobs. But at this level, you can enter all animals in bulk classes. So we need you to indicate the number of animals in. This is an example for breeding ewes, which are crossbred. We've got 400 ewes in the mob. That's the normal mob size. So 400 gets entered a second time at the normal group size. Their current weight, an estimate of their current weight, and also an estimate of what their weight would be if they were at condition score 3 and fully mature, which may be different from their current weight if they're still growing or they're a bit lighter than normal or heavier than normal. Enter the normal number of lambs that you wean from this class of ewes and the age at which you wean the lambs. You can also enter a target for ewes in the future, up to 90 days in the future. So you might enter a target weight that you want them to increase to, say perhaps before lambing, or a target condition score that you want them at lambing time. We also ask you to tell us about their wrinkle scores and breech cover scores in relation, and this is very important for estimating fly strike risk in the app. So there's a couple more slider bars to fill in there, all related to risks of fly strike. Once you've done that for each of your classes of livestock, you then need to move on and enter 3 sets of information, and it's all very simple because they're all drop-down menus. Firstly, key dates like when do you shear, when do you crutch, when do you join, and when might you wean your lambs. That's under key dates. Under treatments, you would enter any routine drenches or fly strike treatments that you apply during the year. And then under feed, you would enter any supplementary feeding programs that you have in place at the time that you established ASKBILL. And there's a drop-down menu there where you can select cereals, protein seeds, silage or hay, and the quality of that feed. Later on, when you have established ASKBILL, if you have a custom-made feed, you can also add that into the system, but you can't do that within the wizard. But it is available later on. Okay, so that finishes the setting up of the property details. You then move to step 2, which is identifying mobs and monitored areas. So this is a concept that some people find a little bit hard to get their head around when they first start using ASKBILL. But what it is an opportunity to identify particular parts of the farm where the pasture might be of a different quality or production or performance. So for example, you might have a highly improved area of lucerne, or you might be grazing a winter wheat crop, and you can identify that as a monitored area, and then you can allocate particular groups of animals to that monitored area and receive alerts and information about those areas and those mobs independently of the farm as a whole. So the first step in setting up a monitored area is to give it a name, and in this example I'm calling it the improved paddocks. And I can then go through the pasture slider process again to indicate that that area has much higher fertility than the farm as a whole, and that the quality of the pasture on that area is much higher than the farm on average as well. So this is a way that you can deal with those specialist areas on the farm, including crops and including annual high-performance fodder pastures and things. The next step is to allocate some animals to that monitored area, and in this case I've selected out the twin-bearing ewes, so I'm not putting all of my breeding ewes onto that monitored area. I'm just putting the 200 twin-bearing ewes, and I'm indicating that they currently weigh 55 kilos and are a condition score 2.5, but on the 1st of September I'd like them to weigh 60 kilos and be condition score 3. So that's how we set a target out in the future that we can monitor our progress towards in the application. So once again, just describing the animals in the monitor area that's the animals in the monitor area and the stock class that they come from, and setting targets for monitoring that mob for the next 3 months. So that completes step 2, which is putting in the monitored mobs and monitored areas, and now you just click on complete account setup and you're pretty much ready to go using ASKBILL. So at any time you can come back to the My Properties area and select Manage the Property, and you can edit any of the inputs that you've just made to set up. Everything that you edit is date stamped, so you don't lose the historical information, but you change. So you might change the quality of the pasture from this day forward, or the number of animals from this day forward if you sold some. So everything's editable and date stamped so that we keep a history of what's happened in the past. The other thing that you can do on this part of the website is manage the people who can see your information. So if you go to the Property Users tab there, you can invite other people to view your information by just entering their email address, and then they'll receive an email invitation to come into ASKBILL and have a look. And they will have to create an account in order to do that, but they won't be charged again for using or viewing your information. So that completes the setup process. If you need any assistance in that going through those steps, you can always contact us through the email. There's a Contact Us button on the website, or you can telephone the CRC.
Lou, can I split use the monitored areas as individual paddocks?
Yes, you can. So we've set the monitored area function up to be very flexible so that you can actually group paddocks together or enter paddocks individually as a monitored area. So it Depends how much information you want to maintain and how much complexity you want in the system, but you can use it either way, at a simple aggregated paddock level or for single paddocks.
Lou, I've tried to do this and I've found it really hard to come up with that average feed availability for the whole farm. What do I do about that?
Yeah. So when ASKBILL first initiates for your farm, it takes today's date and it estimates what's happened over the previous 270 days based on the number of animals you've told it are on the farm and using the weather data. So sometimes it'll make an estimate of how much pasture is available up to today based on the previous 270 days. But you putting a pasture availability estimate in is your opportunity to correct the first estimate if you think it's not quite right. So you don't have to be worrying about being absolutely perfect in your estimate. It's just to get a reasonable starting point and all your predictions go forward from there. And you need to remember that every day ASKBILL calculates again, and tomorrow is a forecast today, but when we get to tomorrow, it's a real figure. So you're building a good history over time. So after 270 days, you can have a really accurate picture of feed availability on the farm. But you need to just get that starting point to get going.
Lou, this actually looks really interesting, but I've never really used an app before. What's the simplest way for me to get started?
So I would recommend to start in a simple way and probably just start operating at the whole farm level to start with. So enter the information about your whole farm and the classes of animal that sit on the farm. Once you start to get familiar with the information that it's generating on a daily basis and the alerts, you can then start to refine things and enter monitored areas and monitored mobs and probably start with one of those to start with as well, just to get confidence and get familiar with the inputs that are required and what it's telling you. And as you get confident and trusting in what's happening, you could move ahead and enter every paddock as a monitored area if you wanted to, and if you were happy to keep it up to date in terms of movements of animals, etc.
Lou, I farm both sheep and cattle. Do I have to put an input in for the cattle to be part of the ASKBILL?
We know that lots of livestock producers run both sheep and cattle, so what we've built within ASKBILL is the capacity to capture cattle numbers and weights and estimates of their feed requirements, and we account for that in the estimates of pasture availability. But what we can't do at the moment is run any models that estimate the growth of those cattle or the reproductive performance of those cattle. We're hoping that we might be able to add that later on, but there's a fair bit of work to be done there.